Just last week, the National Association of Theater Owners called on Congress for a bailout. What exactly are you asking for?
So first, to make it clear, all movie theaters in the United States are shut down now. Last week, we closed them all. And we did it because it's the right thing to do to prevent the spread of the virus. And so now what we need Congress to do is to step in and to help industries like ours that are completely shut down. We have fixed costs ongoing. We have not a single dime coming in revenues. And so what we're looking for Congress to do is to provide loan guarantees so our members have liquidity to survive the next few months. So when they get through the crisis, they can bring the employees back, reinstate the jobs, and people will come flocking out of their homes to see the cinema again.
Now, your member companies have about 150,000 employees. Can you tell us what kind of commitment to those employees your theater chains would make if they did get this bailout in terms of keeping them on the payroll?
So there are three things stepping back in this bill that are really important. One is direct help to furloughed workers. So the federal government is proposing to make quick payments to anybody with income under $70,000, and that's the vast majority of our employees. The government's also looking to extend their unemployment compensation. So the first thing we're seeking in this package is help for our workers, first and foremost. Second, the bill has a whole bunch of great things in it that help healthcare providers to stem the virus. That's really important, obviously, for the country and the world. On a micro level, it's important for businesses like ours. The longer the virus lasts, the longer we have to stay shut down. So we're very, very grateful for the work Congress is doing to combat the virus in this bill. And the third thing that's fundamentally important about this bill is it helps to sustain businesses long enough through the crisis so we can be back up and running when it's over. And some people have called the loan guarantees and the other provisions a slush fund or a bailout. That's not what this is. We aren't asking for a bailout. We're simply asking for liquidity. We're asking for lines of credit guaranteed by the government that can keep us afloat long enough that we can get through the crisis, bring back our workers, and bring back people to cinemas sometime this summer.
And John, have you received confirmation that the theater industry specifically will be included in that bailout bill? Because we have not seen theaters or cinemas mentioned in the latest draft we have read through.
Right. Well, we've been going through drafts all night. Secretary Mnuchin and Leader Schumer are negotiating as we speak. We hope that there will be a deal announced today that will be voted on in terms of a cloture vote today, later in the Senate. Fingers crossed for the sake of the country and all the individuals out there who are unemployed right now. But the way that the bill is currently structured is that specific industries aren't carved out or in, right? With the exception of the airline industry that has a specific provision, all other distressed industries, as they're called, are lumped together. One is the loan guarantee provision, about $425 billion. One is the small business loans, very important for our smaller operators. And in both of those draft sections, industries are not specified. You'd simply have to be qualified as a distressed industry. The Secretary of Treasury would make that determination, and we believe we'll be close to the top of the list. I mean, if you think about what's out there, yes, the airlines are hurting. They're still flying some. Yes, the restaurants are hurting. They're still making deliveries and carry out. We're not making a single dime because we shut down every single theater in the country in the interest of the country's health. And so we are probably top of the list on distressed industries right now.
John, I could argue that movie theaters as a business were in a really tough position already, even before this, especially if you take out Marvel and Star Wars. How is this going to affect small chains compared to big chains? And is there any opportunity here when we do come back for some kind of business model changes that could benefit the theater industry long term?
Well, first I challenge your assumption, right? I mean, last year in the United States, we grossed about $15 billion, a little more than 11 from ticket sales and about 4 from food and beverage. And that's the 8th consecutive year we've been over $11 billion. The year before was an all-time record high. So the movie cinema business in this country and around the world is very, very strong, despite, what some pundits might try to say. But we went from $15 billion a year to 0 last week. This past weekend was the first weekend in the 100-year history of the cinema business when we collected $0 from ticket sales. So this is all about the short term. This is all about combating this virus. This is all about helping our employees until we get to the end. And it's all about having a viable business when we come out at the end. We believe that when the virus is over, people will have been in their homes, cooped up, not able to get out with their family and friends, and they will come flocking back to cinemas as a way to celebrate the end of this crisis. We believe that our movie studio partners have postponed their movies to re-release them this fall and into next year so that we have great product for our fans to see when this crisis is over.
Yeah. I'm sure pent-up demand is going to be a big piece of the puzzle once things start to come back to normal and the worst of this crisis is over with, John. I'm curious about the content pipeline, though, because you've got film productions that are being halted. You've had release dates for some major movies that have been pushed back, obviously, in the midst of all this. And in the meantime, you got Amazon launching Prime Video Cinema to offer some of these current theater releases for people to stream at home. So what will that piece of the equation look like once things do get up and running again?
Yeah, the movie pipeline and schedule is a really important question, and I'm glad you asked it. What we're seeing now are that movies that were released in cinemas prior to the shutdown are going to the home quickly. And we completely understand that. We're going to be shut for 2 or 3 months. There's no way to keep those cinema runs going. So for the studios to monetize the movies that were already in theatrical release before we had to shut down, absolutely take those to the home, give consumers something to watch during the crisis. For those movies that were scheduled for release in April and May, however, what we've asked and been in heavy conversations with the studios about is postponing the release theatrically of those movies and rescheduling them later. And that's exactly what they're doing. Some have already picked rescheduled dates. Sony for Peter Rabbit moved that movie to August. Universal moved Fast 9 to April of 2021. Some of the movies are just being postponed without specified dates. So, for example, Disney's Mulan, Disney's Black Widow, they have committed to re-releasing them theatrically with the right kind of window later. They just have to find the right place in the schedule. And that's important because you're absolutely right that production has been interrupted on many movies that aren't finished yet. And so if we take the movies that were scheduled for April and May and put them in the release calendar toward the end of the year and early next year, they'll fill the gaps of the movies that had to halt their production long enough to get the virus to come back up and running. So this is all a very complicated puzzle right now, but we're very pleased that our studio partners are working very closely with us on how to change the schedule, delay these pictures, and have really great movies ready for consumers when they're ready to come flocking out of their homes.
John, Julia again here. It is a complicated puzzle, but I want to ask you about one piece of it that has the potential to fundamentally change the way the theatrical movie business works. The fact that there is typically a 3-month window between when movies are in theaters and when they're released at home. And as you mentioned, a number of major studios have been releasing their films that were intended for theaters at home at the very same time, whether it's Universal or Sony or Warner Brothers. The question is, once the cat's out of the bag, will it be impossible to force the studios to abide by a 3-month window to protect the movie theater window and those ticket sales going forward?
It's a really good question. It's a very complicated question. And so just to be clear, most of the windows that are being shortened are for movies that were already in our theaters, had already been playing, and for which we were selling tickets for when we had to shut down. We completely understand why those movies don't need a big, long window because there are no theaters open to play them. So accelerating the release of those movies to the home makes absolutely perfect sense. And no one views that as a change in the business models. They view it as a way for the studios to monetize their movies that had already been in theaters and honestly to give Americans something to watch during this crisis. It's the movies scheduled for April and May that matter and need to be postponed. And only one of those movies have announced going straight to the home, and that's Universal on Trolls. We don't see any other studio doing that with their major titles. I'll point out that Universal on Fast and Furious 9 didn't do that either. They moved it to the April 2021 space. So literally it's only one movie from one studio where the signal has been a change in the business model. All the rest of the movies are going to come back up this fall and into next year with the same kind of business model we had before the crisis.